Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to IK Multimedia, NAMM 2018. I was working earlier. So we have an all-star panel for you today to talk about mixing in the box. On our far left, we have Mr. Warren Huart from Produce Like a Pro. Yes. We have Reuben Cohen from Lurssen Mastering. We have Gavin Lurssen of Lurssen Mastering. We have Mr. Dave Way and Mr. CJ Vanston. I'll let you guys take it away.
Check.
Yeah, we have an all-star panel and me.
Could I get some delay of 120 milliseconds? A little plane reverb, please. Thank you. Just some stereo spread.
You want to use MS technique on the vocal here?
No, let's not go too far.
They have that. It's on the wall over there.
Apparently you guys didn't get the video on the gray beard.
No, I don't know.
I thought that was the dress code.
Well, in all reality, anybody's ever watched a Warren Hewitt video knows that I dye my hair.
I know Warren can grow a grey beard. I'm not sure about Reuben yet, though.
Let's be honest. So I have a Dave Way beard with the jet
I trimmed mine
hair.
especially for this show. It's nice and short, just for you, Warren, just because I didn't want to Rick Rubin you out there. So
This is pretty wonderful. I know you all, and and so we're done. So no, this is amazing. I was just saying to Reuben, like a lot of the questions that we talked about before when we were doing the mastering one for anybody that watched are far more pertinent for these guys, you know. And when I interviewed Dave for Produce Like a Pro, you told us the story of when you moved from an SSL to in the box and how you got nervous because you got asked to recall an old song.
Right.
So, because one of the first questions we have is like, you know, pretty much, excuse me, you know, how has moving from analog to digital affected you? And that story you told pretty much sums it up for me.
Yeah, it kind of was the clincher in a way, but you know, I used to have a big 6000E at my studio, and I found myself as years went on, as plugins got better and better, and the dynamics of the industry changed where you kind of were juggling more and more projects, and the days of people coming in and sitting there for the mix and everybody kind of getting it, you know, just right and signing off on it and then being done with it. Now it had become this thing where you're working on it, you're sending it off, and then you could sit around waiting for the, you know, comments to come back, but sometimes it would be a day, 2 days, 2 weeks. But anyway, so this started to change, and I started to get more and more in the box, just summing it first, like, you know, I'd spread it out to 16 channels, and then maybe to 8, and then before you know it, I'm just using the master bus compressor and a little EQ, and so, you know, but I'm sitting here with this big, huge SSL that's just kind of only being used, you know, 10% of it. And I thought long and hard about whether or not I wanted to get rid of it, because once you know, decommission a console like that, you know, you're not going to do it again, you know. So, but I had this one, what you're talking about, this one project where after I had gone to this system I have now, where, you know, I'm in basically an SSL matrix, which is a small SSL with an analog path and inserts, and I have all my favorite EQs and compressors in there. But I had, you know, been moving further and further in the box, and I had somebody, it was a T-Bone Burnett record, and they needed, at least it's like 2 or 3 years after it, they needed some kind of a revision. I don't remember if they had changed the lyrics or they did change something in the song, and they said, can you know, change it and make it different? And I said, well, I gotta look, because I've changed my setup since then. And so I went and listened to you know, I found the files and listened to the way.
So it's super organic.
Yeah, exactly. Nervous, you know, we all know, you know, you had Mike Persante here before, you know, exactly. We're all familiar with kind of the T-Bone, you know, beautiful, but this was kind of a special project. But anyway, so I listened to the mix, and I put it up and listened, and it's like just warm and beautiful, and I thought to myself, oh man, this is so good. Have I made a mistake by doing, you know? And then when I went and opened up the multi-tracks, I see that it was completely in the box, and I was like, all right, good. Well, you know, because we so often we're convinced by our these preconceptions that we have, and it really influences our judgments as we're making them. And I'm sitting there listening, thinking, oh, this sounds so analog, and this sounds just the way I like things to sound. Still in that fight for was this better? Is this better how I'm working now? I still don't know. And then when I kind of realized that, I put it behind me and I said, nope, I'm moving forward. I know this is what I want, and this just kind of proved it to me. So, yeah.
Amazing. And CJ, you're working on an amazing album at the moment, which I wouldn't mind you talking about. It sounds so freaking awesome. And you've done that completely in the box.
Yeah, and I'm a Logic guy, probably the
Right.
only one here. Is this working?
Just the
Well
album.
known. Where'd it go? Oh, yeah. Mommy. Ladies and gentlemen. Oh, it's actually broken up. So how about this? Oh, I like that so much better.
Great. Don't forget.
Oh, you got some warmth
Here, I'm
back
gonna
now,
get your
CJ.
phone for you.
It's very
More
authoritative.
important here.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my phone.
Actually, that little mic might be quite fitting as describing this new record.
Oh, that's true. I'm a Logic guy. I have been for probably 15 years. I love Logic, absolutely love it. Dean Parks left, I guess. He's the only other Logic guy I know. Oh, there he is. Yeah, you're hiding back there. Yeah, we both love Logic. It's a real musician's tool. I would encourage any musician.
That's a real musician.
Yeah, you think? But I hated tape. Huge hassle. I hated the non-recallability of all the consoles. The second I could do something in the box, I was in. And I used to work with a guy 25 years with Greg Ladani, an absolute genius. And sadly, he's not with us here anymore. But Greg was the first guy I knew that was he mixed some of the greatest records of all time, from Toto to Jackson Browne to Don Henley and Fleetwood Mac. And he went right into the box the second he could. And he said, man, if I want it to sound warm, I'll make it sound warm. I don't need to throw it to some magic box and have it come back and be warm. And that's what the thing with tape, I think there's a fascination. We throw it to tape and it comes back so warm. But you didn't make it do that. The tape did it. And so I like what he was saying. If I want it to sound a certain way, I'll make it sound that way. So I've never looked back. I do a lot of film work also, and for moving through cues, there's no way I could do this on a console with tape. It's impossible. So I've completely embraced it since the beginning. I had never trusted myself as a mixer, though, and continued sending my stems out until it was Steve Lukather. We were working on a record, and he said, man, your demos sound better than the mixes. And he says, you should mix this record. And then I thought, oh, well, I should get a summing box, and I'll go to someone's studio. And he goes, no, this shit sounds great, man. And it does. I love it. I completely embrace it. I think it sounds amazing. The plugins are amazing. Everything about it. I'm all in. Have been.
What?
And I don't miss tape at all.
It's
Oh
funny.
My God.
Did we actually, honestly, 20 years ago, use the word tape sounds warm? I always remember thinking.
Yeah.
I always remember thinking it played back and go, "Where's the high end gone?"
where'd the transients go? Yeah.
I don't remember them going, "Wow, that sounds
Yeah.
so warm." I used to always go, "Oh shit, I got to put this high
Well,
end."
the
back on."
thing was, I remember doing a great take, because I was a session musician for 25 years. So I'd be out with the cats and we do a great take. Hey, come in and listen. And you stand in there listening, and you're hearing the 2-inch
Yeah.
and listening. Well, no one's ever going to hear it like that again.
Yeah.
So that sound, if that could make it to the end user, I get that.
Right.
But
The performance nature of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
this way we're working now is it's just so fabulous.
Well, the record you're working on at the moment is like massive.
Massive.
It's been announced, you can say it.
Oh, it has. Well, no, he can announce it. It's his record.
Yeah, we mastered it on Thursday with these guys.
Yeah, there you go.
So
I've
it's
been
not
musical
out yet.
director for Spinal Tap for 27 years.
Yeah.
Kind of one of my hidden jobs. Thank you. And I've scored all of Christopher Guest's movies. I don't know if you know Mighty Wind or Guffman or any of those. So I got looped onto that. Matter of fact, it was 27 years ago this week, that I did my first one-nighter with Spinal Tap. And I said, no other keyboard player is ever going to play with this band again. So anyway, Harry Shearer, who plays Derek Smalls in the movie, about a year and a half ago, said, I want to make the Derek Smalls solo album. And I said, dude, I am totally in. So this thing started, it became a 70-year-old rocker's testament to his life and where he's been and what he's done with a comedic thing. But I'm the guy that brings the serious music to it. I want it to sound kind of pompous and overblown and overdone, which
Really
is kind of what I'm all
It's
about.
kind of easy to do, yeah.
And, we started getting into this, and all of a sudden I started making some phone calls. I'm like, hey, Steve Vai, what's up? Oh, man, good, get me on that record. And then Satriani, and then Dweezil Zappa, then Lukather, and then Larry Carlton, then Jeff Baxter, and then Donald Fagen, and David Crosby, Rick Wakeman, the Foo Fighters, Snarky Puppy. I'm spacing on the rest of them. Chad Smith, Greg Bissonette. I mean, it was unbelievable. So, and then I started.
Did any drummers die during the making of the record?
I can't comment on that. I started temping some orchestra stuff on it, and he goes, well, we should just do real orchestra. So then we did the Budapest Symphony over the whole thing. It's Live and Let Die meets Quadrophenia meets Moody Blues meets the Monkees. Anyway.
Who brought the monkeys?
I just thought of that.
All right, gentlemen. I know we went through this morning, and it's the similar situation. Now, obviously, you developed the NMC plugin, which was specifically a digital solution to let's say, an analog problem, but that isn't really true. But how do you feel it's affected you? Because now, obviously, these guys are probably giving you stuff like we were talking about earlier that's probably had quite a lot of processing on the bus. How's it changed for you? I mean, over the last... Gavin in particular, if you don't mind starting with you, just because, you may be a little bit over 22, 24, but you've seen it from when, we used 30. To... Maybe we had an SSL bus compressor and a Poltec 20 years ago, That was all you were really seeing on your mix bus when people were sending you stuff.
We originally decided to develop this because one of the things I've noticed since I've started, I started in 1991 with Doug Sachs as my mentor, and it was all tape. I mean, boxes and boxes of tape were showing up every single day, and at entry level, my job was to log everything and find a room for it in this building and all that. And you really had to have a mentor, and you had to apprentice, protege-mentor relationship, and it was very limiting. There was only some certain, a few slots to get in. And over the course of time, since that first day up until here we are today, I've seen this gradual change of how holistically we can all make music now. So even though there's room for professionals to be professionals, there's so many people that we were meeting at conventions and just calling us, and just exposure to so many people that really wanted what we do, but there's only so many hours we have in a day, and there's just more work, more people than the amount of work can be done. So we wanted to, over the course of time, developing our console and the chain of events and the stuff that's in there, we never were secretive about it. We were happy to discuss everything that we designed. And we found ourselves a lot of times, like, for instance, if I work with Dave or CJ on something, these guys are very consistent in the way they approach things. So there's kind of a way that we'll patch gear to start out, just to take a listen. We can always unpatch and change something if the music calls for it. But working with clients consistently, you learn their patterns, and then you kind of have a starting place. And most of the time, it goes like that. So we were coming up with some presets that we built into this based on genres of music, and there are alterations in the presets. So we found that being a part of what the current music industry is, which is to empower people to make decisions and make music and create and express, give away our secrets. There's no secrets, but just give the knowledge and just be, in so doing, become a part of this holistic culture of music making, to where it's really kind of an even playing field. Anybody can talk to anybody out here. If Al Schmidt were to show up and somebody just got out of college, he'd be delighted to have a conversation with this person. So that was our impetus to design this product, so people could have what we do without necessarily interacting with us. The way it's affected us is interesting, because if you look at our console, it really is a very fancy bus compressor with some equalization. Depends who's using it. So the plugin can act as that, and people are using it on the bus, people are using it on drum stems, people are using it in all kinds of unintended ways. But what's happening in the industry is people are sending in mixes, and the A&R and the artist and other people that are judging the mixes really want this snap. They want something that is going to present this music next to all other music. So by the time it comes to us, it's gone through something like that. And in some cases, we've got mixes with our plugin on it, and then they'll give us the mixes without that, so we can come in and take that and maybe take it further if necessary, that kind of thing. So it's affected us in that regard. I think the way of the industry when you do a mix is to really give it that impact. The old days of judging a mix where you listen to how the bass integrates with the guitar, those days are over. Now it's about the entire thing and how does it impact you. So you really need something like that. And our tool has been used by people to present something, and then we'll come and redo it. And then at other times they make deliverables using it. And,
Great.
other products out there as well, but that's how it's affected us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, Reuben, when I first got the guys gave me the NMC to try out, I maybe about 6-7 months ago. One thing I noticed about it was most mastering softwares tend to be like taking sledgehammers to, oh look, there's a bump. And it's definitely, what you've got is definitely more in the subtlety, more what I expect from a mastering engineer to do.
It can,
Is that a deliberate?
We designed it to work on any type of material. We had to design it that way because you don't know what's going to be the mix. You don't know what's feeding it. So it has to be as light as a feather or as heavy as a tank. It needs to do a lot of work or very, very little. So we designed it, and also what we were up against is it has to be easy to use and it has to deliver immediate results very quickly, because that's how we work. We get something, I'd say about 95% of the way there, maybe, yeah, almost that, within the first few minutes. And then after that, we're fine-tuning and really, really focusing things at that point. So the idea behind it and the way we work is that we don't add one process and listen to it and then add another process on top of that, commit to that, and then add a third and a fourth and a fifth. That's not the way we work. Some people might work that way and have great results that way, but it's not the way we do it, because the philosophy behind that is, if, let's say, for instance, you have a great first process and a great second process and a third process, and then you get to that fourth process, it could be that you would have made different decisions on the first, second, and third had that fourth not been a part of it. So the idea behind it is that all these processes interrelate and favor each other as a global. So the EQ favors the compression, and the compression then favors the EQ, and that all works with the limiting, and it's all one process. So if you drive it just a little bit, a mix might only need just a little bit of something, and that's all it needs. But it might need a whole lot too. So no matter what you're working on, you can drive it in such a way that it'll work for whatever you're working on, just by default.
Absolutely.
Less is more, What's interesting though as well is, I know this happens, and there was even a little bit with Harry on this. Artists have become conditioned to this new environment, and a lot of times people wait to hear what we've done before they judge the mix, because they know they'll go judge the mix, and they'll call us and say, hey, those settings you did? Do that again. I'm going to send you a fresh mix, and they'll have one day to make revisions, and they'll give revisions for 23 songs. In the old days, it was, you're lucky if you get one song done in a 3-day course.
You talk about in the box, try doing 23 mix revisions in a day.
That's what people are used to.
And a great example of that is just when we were working on the record a couple weeks ago, you wanted to make one little fine-tune change, maybe it was reverb or a snare thing, came home, and you said, hey, Reuben, we'll have it to you in like an hour, That only exists now.
My studio's like a mile from these guys, so it's like we're living in Mayberry. It's so cool.
That's the luxury that only exists today. So we had to attach a little thumb drive to a carrier pigeon, and
I'm guilty of that too.
And he ended up at Bernie Grumman. We had to go pick up the drive. I'm kidding.
It wasn't that long ago we were always FedExing it. It was probably about 10 years ago when you couldn't really send 10 gigs. Through the net.
We had a FedEx. Every day we had a FedEx stack this high.
Yeah.
And if you missed that FedEx cutoff, you're like toast. Now it doesn't matter. It's like FTP it.
We used
it'll
to
be there in
carry
10 minutes.
1 gig drives down the hallway. We called it SneakerNet. We'd walk them down to one room,
Sneaker net.
plug them, walk them down to the other room. These heavy 1 gig drives, I remember those.
There was this FTP called Swap Drive.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it would get to like 99%, and then it would do
Stop,
nothing.
yeah.
And you'd wait, and you had a choice to either do it over
Yeah.
and stay another hour,
Right.
or maybe just hope that it would complete.
Right.
And hopefully it would.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't fun.
Can I ask a mastering
Please.
question to these guys? So since the Spotify
Like,
world it's changed our loudness, competition. Have you noticed that reaching back to the artists and the producers yet? Do you see a significant change in dynamics as a result of that? Now that people know you're not necessarily winning with a louder mix.
everybody's got the tools. Even if you just buy a Macintosh, an Apple computer, you've got the tools to. Everybody can out loud everybody else. There's no reason to go there. And these streaming services are now altering like radio used to do. They used to put de-essers and all kinds of stuff to level out playlists and things like that. So the new deliverables, the new way of people consuming music, these things are being leveled out. The lower it is, the better it's going to sound once they do their thing, because if it's loud, it's smashed down. So people, in my career, I've noticed that people have always valued dynamic range. But they've always wanted it loud too.
Right.
They always want both. So a lot of times
you can trick 'em.
what we do, and I don't mean in any way that we don't reveal. What you can do is, if you want some more impact on a chorus, you might swell it with EQ and open it up, so to the ear it feels like it's opening up. It's all done with conversation with the client, of course, but.
And do you
we
do
can
like
get into that
little
kind of
volume bumps too? Like
Oh, yeah. All the time.
Yeah, all the time. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, when you're EQing into compression, that compression is working, right?
Right.
So let's say you're working on a chorus and you're giving it a lot of hype, and then all of a sudden it goes from a chorus to a verse.
Yeah.
That compression releases and the overall level comes up a little bit.
Right.
So you have to make some volume
Right,
rides.
exactly,
Yeah,
right.
to compensate for that, to not make more dynamic range, but to maintain the dynamic range that was intended in the mix.
Yeah, this Derek Smalls record has a ton of dynamic range. It's really a huge sounding record. So in order to retain what CJ did when he mixed it is to really get into that so that we can feed the limiters correctly. So even if we go down for a verse, it's not really that we're turning it down, it's that we're kind of following what was done so that it retains. And that can be increased if needed. Like, let's give it a little more impact, so we might alter the level even further to create that.
That's an everyday thing for us. We do that pretty much across. I mean, there's some mixes that are more linear and we don't do those types of rides, but oftentimes we do, and we built that into the LMC too, anticipating that need.
It's funny, I never thought about loud. I never know. Once did I think about, oh God, we got to make this really loud. Never even.
And what's great?
That's great.
Get the Derek Smalls record. It's pretty loud.
Yeah.
So without prompting,
Well, I
it
guess
got
it better
there.
be.
but it's not like
But it goes to show is what I'm saying. If that's what you're worried about, then you're putting less energy on the quality of the songwriting, which is, everybody's going to listen to a great song that doesn't sound so good, but nobody's going to listen to a loud song that doesn't sound good.
I just know where 3 o'clock on my monitor controller feels,
Right.
and where it hits my chest. And sometimes I'll pull my dB meter out, and it's like 83
Perfect.
every time.
Yeah.
It's amazing how acute our ears are.
Yeah.
I mean, we're really pretty
That's your
amazing,
comfort
aren't we? But it's true, and that's the same with our listeners. People, I hate when people say, "Well, they'll never notice that." I mean, that just drives me nuts. I listened to records that I listened to when I was a kid. There was a Blood, Sweat, and Tears record, and David Clayton Thomas hits a note, and it's like, it drove me nuts when I was like 11 years old. How did they leave that on the record? And so a couple months ago, I was sitting on my porch on a Sunday, I put it on. He's barely out of tune.
Oh yeah.
But that was driving me nuts when I was 11. So, we've got that built in, that sense in our ears.
Wow.
To answer Dave's question though, I think that just doing it day in, day out, the loudness wars, or the request to get something loud, kind of peaked around 2008, 2009. And after that, because there was a lot of awareness, there were some records that came out, I don't even have to mention it, maybe you guys already know. There's a lot of awareness that came out about loudness. And how there was one record that was just completely overdone, and then people were comparing it to the other versions on YouTube, and there was a bunch of awareness raised. And this record is so loud that there's no real way to listen to it without kind of turning it down. You know, you want it to sound loud and proud.
Which is exactly the opposite, that they want.
That's the worst thing that can happen. You want to be driving down the freeway with maybe, and cranking an aggressive record, You want to rock your socks off, you don't have to turn it down, So if you go beyond that point, you might end up at that position where you're like, I don't even know where to set this thing.
Well, another thing that happens is when we deliver what we're done with, and the mixer too, or whoever is delivering anything, it's not anything until somebody hits play. And when you hit play, you go through a process of converting from digital to analog through a chip and an amplifier. And that's when it becomes something. That's when that file turns into something that then vibrates air molecules. So that's consumer grade equipment. 99% of the music that gets consumed is through consumer grade equipment, cheap stuff that they throw into a phone, or Bluetooth or something. This stuff's mass produced and very inexpensive. So we have to consider this crazy amount of professional work and how that is going to come out on a cheap chip and a cheap amplifier that's designed for you to consume. So if we get it to a certain level, and we know, because we know our game and have done our research, how that's going to work in a car or off of a phone or however you consume it, that's part of the responsibility of what we have. If you say, hey, make it loud, I have to find a way to tell you no, but yet you call me for your next gig as well. It's a very delicate thing to do. So you have to know your stuff. That's when people respect it. And I think, the key is people are starting to really realize now that a good song is a good song. If you've got a good song sounding good, you're great, but it's not about how loud it is. It just isn't. It never has been.
Well, last year at this show, I was
He
talking
sounds so good on that mic, doesn't he? I'm
Yes,
very
I do have a little bit of a low-end thing going here. I'll hold it out here. I don't want to overpower. I was talking to George Massenberg. We were talking about music, and he says, "Yeah, I'm getting into 384 now, not 192, man. I'm doing 384." And he played me something, and it was a harpsichord. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? I don't even know what this means, what you're playing to me. And he just says, he went on a rant about MP3s are killing music, and da. And I said, let me just ask you, didn't you fall in love with music on a fold-down 45 player?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And it was the Beatles.
AM radio.
Yeah, AM radio.
It sounded great.
Mono.
I am so not fixated on any of that stuff. You make a great song, a great mix, and like Gavin said, just make it sound great on everything.
Yeah.
All right, so how has mixing and mastering changed for you? Because one thing I've noticed with, earbuds, small speakers, laptops, we're talking about all that. Everything now, that if I go back to records, especially the late 70s, early 80s, they sound so splashy.
Well, I'd start by trimming a little low end off of that thing. Just for the moment. I can turn it back up later.
But then, some of the records I grew up loving, which I still love, don't get me wrong, but mainly, like you're saying, through the songs and stuff, are not translating in the way that they used to when I sat there with my big 70s speakers that were like this, and it was like lots of low mid. Now we're increasingly listening to, not so much the MP3, not that format, but it's the speakers. It's the way we're.
It's also the style of the music, though. I mean, you listen to what just came out of there. You've got 808 hi-hats that are tuned at about 12K, maybe not that high, and then a bass thing that's resonating at
But I'm wondering if that's sort of
so,
feeding into both. Because we're listening in ways that doesn't translate, so people are mixing for that medium. I do know a couple of hip-hop guys that are telling me they're very conscious of how people
are
hear.
writing for that medium.
Yeah, writing for that medium.
Exactly, yeah.
So the modern production techniques, there's some really talented people out there making this pop music. But a lot of it I actually don't care for that much, but sonically it is just stupid good.
Yeah.
And I think we've extended the whole dynamic range. So we've had to keep up with it. You listen to a lot of these old records; they're very thin sounding, And I dig it. I dig the big sound.
On the original vinyl or the mastered for CD.
Either one, just in the general approach to the mix. Some of those old Yes records,
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great sideline conversation, if you don't mind. You guys went back and remastered the George Harrison stuff.
It's not me.
It was the Mexican food again, wasn't it?
Excuse me, guys. Excuse me.
Yeah, sorry. So you went back and you remastered George Harrison's catalog.
Yeah, that was crazy.
I remember you were both talking about this because you have to make it feel like people remember, but if you actually made it sound exactly like it was, they would tell you there wasn't enough low end, they would tell you...
It's a very fascinating process because, you know, we are actually one of the few facilities that I know of that really work on new frontline music and reissue stuff, and it's usually one or the other with all my colleagues. So I'm fortunate enough to have done a lot of that work in the early days that we still get the call, you know, and we had a relationship with Danny Harrison, George's son, and so he decided to go all out, you know, and included his mother, Olivia, George's wife, and so we worked closely with them, and a lot of it was initial discussions, which are this. So that music existed at a time when none of this technology that you can consume music existed, you know. Also, people that are going to consume that music that consumed it then are this much older, several decades older. So you have to do this music for those people and the new generation of fans. Now, it's interesting that we're talking about level because level doesn't matter. It never has. We have to play this game, we have to get in there, but it just never mattered. Nobody's returned a CD or a piece of music ever because it was quieter than something else. So, in that light, you've got to create a balance of this music that's going to compete with what's going on today. You're living in a mobile environment. There's much more noise coming at you, visual, audio. There's just much more stuff. So you have to put that music in a place that's going to measure up to this. But at the same time, make people feel like they felt when they first consumed this music. So here comes the low-end monster. So you cannot. Where was I? That thing just cleared my. It's like a meditation. It cleared me out. What were we talking about?
Audio sorbet.
So it's a fascinating concept because you're creating this reminiscent feeling, but you cannot slam it into all kinds of stuff like you pointed out earlier. This stuff is a sledgehammer out there. So you cannot do that because it's going to get
you've still got to compete in a modern world.
So what you have to do is you have to create it. The consumers expect something within a window.
Right.
There's a window of expectation that the consumer has without them even realizing it. And that's why these products exist, so you can do that and take it to this place. So if you come in on the low side of this window, you can just as easily come in on the high side of this window, level-wise, compression-wise, any type of processing-wise. So you come in to an area of expectation that consumers have in today's world of music, and you try to retain this dynamic range as best you can, but in some cases you have to reduce the dynamic range. Also, when you're working from original tapes, they've lost a lot of energy, so you really have to crack them open. They were a little more open in the old days. So it's a very interesting balancing act of creating this reminiscent feeling, but at the same time, a new fan would be able to digest this stuff and make it feel like stuff they're used to.
And you were able to go back to all the original 2-track tapes?
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of the mistake, I'm sure we all remember, in the early 80s is they went back and took the vinyl masters.
No, this was done right.
Yeah. Okay, good. Because people were saying, oh, it's going to sound great, but of course they were remastering CDs from vinyl masters, which had all low end.
Now, the Harrison family is very proud of this project, and what they've done as a result of this project is they've resurrected everything from Dark Horse Records. So George is a very active guy, and he signed his friends, and they made records. And now Olivia's wanted to pay respect to those records. So now we're going through those. There's not a huge amount of them, but you know, this is a big part of the Harrison family legacy, and they're extremely proud of it. You know.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
What perspective do you think you've brought to it? You know, not
I mean, it's the
being
same,
like us, sort of growing up with that.
You know, everything that Gavin just said, and also the same perspective that we bring to any record. You know, it just has to connect with whoever's listening to it. So if we can do our job is best done if we increase that connection to the maximum, you know, and if we can increase it any more, we'll figure out a way to, you know, but the thing that creates the disconnect is processing and sounding like you processed it, you know, in whatever way that means. It could be over processing in terms of compression, too much level for a mix that can't take that much level, brightening something that just feels like somebody got in there and brightened it, you know. Not every record is going to be balanced the same way, you know. So you can lean this way or that way and kind of get away with it as long as it feels musical. But if you lean too far one way, you start feeling like it might be pushed in this particular way that creates some kind of disconnect. And to the untrained ear, they might not be able to latch on to why, But for some reason, they might be like, yeah, you know what, I'll listen to that in a little bit. I can't quite digest it right now, for whatever reason. You know, but to the trained ear, I can tell you why that is. It's because they're listening to that processing rather than the music.
See, I like this idea of the two of you working on it, because I know us four would have probably grown up with those records, known every element of those songs, where that's not something you grew up with.
I kind of did, though.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I know the records, too.
Yeah, I just think it'd be an interesting dynamic between the two.
Well, we work well together because, oftentimes Gavin will be on the console and then he'll step away and I'll get in there, and it's like we tag team it, it keeps us on
cool.
target.
If you ever get to watch if you ever have the pleasure of watching these guys work, it's like nobody else is like that. You guys are a real team, and I love just watching you guys, when you first listen, first playback, and
I know it's invisible.
We figured out a thing.
We don't even talk anymore.
This thing just happened.
Right.
So there it is.
It's been it's like 12 years in now, so.
Yeah.
They're adopting soon.
Reuben came to me 12 years ago, and my neighbor, I live up in Laurel Canyon, and I got this neighbor who's a TV director, and he said, hey, I got this writing partner. He's got a kid. He wants to hang out in the studio, and I'm like, we're busy, just do me the favor, So I said, all right. So Reuben used to come in, and he would shake my hand every day. And I said, you don't have to shake my hand every day. You work here now. And he said, I do. And I said, yeah. And that was it. He worked there from then on. And he's become, in that amount of time, he's become a Grammy Award winner.
It's rare. One of the biggest flaws of the younger generation I work with is complete lack of knowledge of music history. Abject, unbelievable lack of knowledge. I am astounded. I mean, I was working on a record with this girl, and I said, we should put a ukulele on this song. She goes, well, do you know a ukulele player? Okay, yeah. Jeff Baxter, yeah, could you come in? So Skunk Baxter comes in and plays, and blazes it and walks out, and she goes, that old guy was so good. And I said, that was Skunk Baxter. Who's that? And I said, he was in Steely Dan. Who's that? And I said, well, he was in the Doobie Brothers after that. Who's that? And I said, the fact that you don't know that, but you know what Kim Kardashian wore last night, really pisses me off. You got a supercomputer in your butt that I would have killed for when I was 13, and that's all you know. Maybe you don't belong in this room. And she goes, you're just saying that because you're old. And I said, no, let me tell you something.
Well, there's truth to that. You can only say that if you're old.
Let me finish this. And I said, no, because when I was your age, I knew the history of music back to the 1700s. I knew who Frankie Valli was. I knew who Rudy Valli was. I knew who Stephen Foster was. I know Scriabin. I knew the beginning of Louis Armstrong's whole career. I researched all that. I went to the library and transcribed Charlie Parker solos at 17 with a pencil because I wanted it that much. And so I said, you just don't want it bad enough.
And it informs, it helps you make great decisions.
Thank you for attending. The NAMM show is now closed. Please make your way to the exits at this time. See you tomorrow and have a great night.
Who is that guy?
Who the fuck is that?
You just said you kissed that guy off. The young guy.
Nobody leaves.
Oh man! Oh yeah, you're gonna do the technical.
That was amazing.
Great.
That was
fantastic.
So, can we
excellent
go
time.
much longer, or do we have to? Oh, okay.
I gotta go.
He's
right,
playing.
he's gotta
He's
play,
playing at the
yeah,
Tech
yeah.
tonight. So.
But can I just add to your point? I think we probably talked about this before, but when I was a little so-and-so when I was a kid, I remember when I left home early at 16, I got my first telephone number. And this was such a little so-and-so that I was, that I registered a telephone number under the name Charlie Patton. Because I was like, if you know me, you'll know how to get hold of me. I mean, it's like, to me, it's like if you don't know who Robert Johnson is, just give up music. I mean, really. I mean, you've got to understand.
Was this before you needed area codes, or was this?
But it's no. But I know it sounds really pretentious. But what I mean is, like, it's like the I mean, Robert Johnson in particular, you know, growing up in England, like every R&B pop band ever in the history of freaking music, it was like all came from that, you know. We all knew as kids, you know.
By the way, Warren, everything you say sounds pretentious with that accent. I just wanted to tell you.
Low blow.
That's because I'm actually really from Wisconsin. They call me Wisconsin Warren.
Oh, I love this guy.
Yeah. But no, I hear what you're saying. I mean, it's true. I think, you know, in a more inspiring way, definitely learn your musical history.
Well, it goes down to what we were just talking about it informs your decision making, and you know, as whether it's mixing, mastering, writing, performing, you know, if you're a player, writer, you need to make decisions that are correct for what the people, you know, what the music requires, sure. You know? So if you're, you know, they're playing Robert Johnson stuff and you're going to start doing wheedly on, you know, you're making a wrong decision there. And, you know, and so the broader your knowledge of the history of music and styles, more apt to make the right decisions.
And especially now.
And it shows a passion.
Especially now.
Yes, you care and love music and you want to learn.
You don't meet astronomers that don't know who Copernicus was, okay?
But there's so many gray areas between the links in the chain now. You know, it was more clearly defined even just 20, 30 years ago. So many gray areas. So it's even more important to really know the foundation of that house, you know?
So we start off
talking
talking
about what we would
about...
have given for this when I was 13 years old.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I agree. Yes.
Thank you for coming to the 2000.
I gotta go. All right. Thank you very much,
Thanks, guys.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
You guys rock.